Hi, I'm Abby, as Paul mentioned, the designer on AMP. And before we get started, I want to do a fun little exercise. So I want everyone to turn to their neighbor and give them a high five. Yes! All right, we've seen a lot of awesome stuff today. We're going to see more. And now we're going to talk about building websites with AMP. So as you can see, this Italian news site, La Iene, has a standard 2-column homepage. And as you'll see on the next slide, there we go. A really awesome full-featured search with thumbnails, a timestamp, auto search, and they also, yeah, we're having fun today. All right, so we saw an awesome search. And then we will also see, in addition to this awesome search, a really awesome sidebar with a menu on the next slide. There we go. Okay, so now you're thinking, no way, it's not possible to build that in AMP. Totally wrong, 100% built in AMP. So it is possible to get all these cool interactive features. It is possible to build your entire site with AMP. And now we'll talk about the previous approach on the next slide. All right. So as Paul mentioned earlier, there was a way of thinking about kind of building a home site and then also building all these other extra pages specifically for driving traffic. So things like AMP, Instant Articles, Apple News, all of those other platforms. And as a result of this process, people were saying things like, hey, Paul, thanks so much. People were saying things like, it's too much to maintain, why do I have to build another page? If AMP is for static content, then how am I supposed to build these interactive pages? And all of those comments were totally understandable. So we acknowledged that this approach was not ideal. Now, people are just using AMP as a source of truth for their pages, and you can use your AMP for your website too. Now is about the time where you're probably thinking, okay, this is great, but what about the speed benefits that you get from the cache? So let's talk about how this site, La Iene, how their non-amped page served from the origin loads at about 6.9 seconds. The amped version, still served from the origin, lands 3.7 seconds faster in this case. It's a pretty big difference. In addition, you don't get any of this unstyled CSS or these flashes that you'll see on the right. All right, so now that we've talked about speed, we've got the basics covered, let's talk more about why using AMP for your website is actually a great idea. So AMP gives you higher level components that give you UX for free. As you know, it is possible to build interactive components with things like HTML and bind, but you have to start completely from scratch. So these high-level components that we're starting to build more of, like the carousel and the date picker, give you all this interaction design and developmental complexity for free. So in this case, you just have to write amp-carousel, and for the date picker, it's amp-date picker. Super easy. In addition, some of you may not know this, but our high-level components are responsive by design. So this means that with these high-level blocks, we specifically keep in mind multiple device sizes so that you don't have to. None of that messy media query stuff. Also, because there's a team of contributors around AMP working every day to update the library, as there are updates to platforms and browsers, as we know, this means the library is evergreen. This basically offloads the maintenance work of an entire engineering team so that you don't have to go through a painful upgrade process. That's especially great because it means that not only can developers use these components to create great experiences that they might not have previously had access to, maybe resources or even expertise, it frees up everyone's time to make other awesome things with a bigger impact. You know, things like colonizing Mars. So to top it all off, you also get to be a part of this enormous community. So as Malta mentioned in the keynote, we have over 560 contributors right now internationally. We have this awesome Slack channel, which is very active, where you can constantly interact with other devs, get feedback. We have a YouTube channel with awesome videos, and of course, talk to us here. We do have a talk at 4:30 today on contributing to AMP if you haven't done that yet and are excited to do so. So check that out. Okay, now that we've talked about the approach, let's see how it's being adopted. Oh. The Irish Times has fully amped all of their mobile article pages. So that's their source of truth for those. Other sites, like the Spiegel Daily, on the next slide. There we go. Tasty, on the next slide, and La Yene are 100% AMP sites. So they're fully featured websites, all the interactivity you would expect from a normal website, and every page is built with AMP. So that's pretty awesome. Other companies, which you'll see on the next slide, have taken this one step further. Oops, there we go. All right, so these sites have combined AMP plus PWAs to provide an even richer, more app-like, more engaging experience. I highly encourage you to check out bmw.com. It's really awesome. You can see what's possible. They're also speaking later at our talk dedicated to AMP plus PWA, so check that out if you're interested too. We believe in this process so much that on the next slide, you'll see our own websites are fully built with AMP. So last year at AMP Conf, we unveiled a beautiful, again, fully interactive, fully responsive website. And it worked so well that we also applied the same principle to AMP by example. And I can vouch for the engineers that this has been dramatically easier to maintain, and no Webpack or tree shaking was needed. So again, check it out, look at the code, and see for yourself. And with that, I will turn it over to the previous slide, which has Jess from BuzzFeed. She'll talk about how they amped their tasty.co site.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Abby. Cool. So for those who aren't familiar, Tasty is BuzzFeed's food brand, and we specialize in those top-down recipe videos where the hands come in and are cooking, and you might have seen them, throughout your Facebook feed or Instagram feed. So Tasty actually has a massive audience of over 300 million people per month across all of our different platforms. And now we're really excited to offer all of our recipes on the web with tasty.co. Cool, so I'm gonna touch a little bit on why we chose to go all in with AMP for tasty.co. So AMP on desktop, mobile, just everywhere. So before I worked on Tasty, I actually worked on BuzzFeed.com and the article pages there. And we took the approach there of our non-AMP site and then our AMP templates, which were two separate entities. And I learned pretty fast there that definitely proved to be a challenge at times. So as we would iterate on our main site, we would always have to remember to maintain parity with our AMP templates. So definitely was a bit of a challenge. And moving to Tasty and starting Tasty from scratch, we kind of wanted to avoid that altogether. So again, we were in a unique position where we didn't have a main site to base it off of. So we were literally starting from scratch. And we knew we wanted to offer AMP to our users, so we figured, why not just go all in? And it kind of eliminated framework choice overload for us. We knew we wanted AMP, so we just went full steam ahead. And again, the simple nature of the recipe page here, you can see there's some text, video, thumbnail. These things, we're totally capable with AMP, so we figured that it would be a really awesome idea. But of course, with that, definitely came some challenges and some learning experiences, which I will touch on once it moves to the next slide. Cool. So one challenge that we definitely ran into building out this site early on was we were trying to create a show more button. So kind of like a lazy load feature of recipes in a list. So at the time, this didn't exist within AMP. So what we ended up having to do to get this to work was that button is actually linked to a form submit, and it would send out a request and basically populate an AMP mustache template with the next set of recipes, the next results. So that's kind of an example where it wasn't super ideal, and had we written our own custom JavaScript, it might have been a little bit easier, but having that we went full in with AMP, this is an example where we kind of just had to make this work. So, oops, I'm gonna go back. Skipping over all of my slides. Sorry about that. One more. OK, awesome. So sorry about that. So the next challenge we definitely ran into, which a lot of people mention, is CSS weight. So at BuzzFeed, we have a CSS component library called Solid, and we knew we really needed to use Solid for our site. We wanted to maintain our brand cohesiveness. So unfortunately, though, Solid didn't really play nicely with the CSS weight requirements within AMP. So what we ended up having to do is add in the Purify CSS Webpack plugin to our build process. And basically what that did was just tree shake any unused classes, stuff like that. And we were able to get the weight down 25%, which was awesome. But this is another example where if we had not gone the AMP route, we might not have had to spend the time working through the CSS weight like we had to in this case scenario. But overall, as far as challenges go, really one of the big ones was making sure you're fully on the same page with everyone on your team. So whether it's designer or product people, everyone really has to be on the same page with what AMP is capable of and what an AMP site is not capable of. So just being aware of the different AMP components and just knowing which features just might not be able to work in an AMP site. So awesome. So I'm going to touch a little bit now on some really awesome things that we learned while making a fully AMP site. So one of which being fully utilizing the existing AMP components. So for example, we had share buttons on our site here, and we were able to just really easily plug in the existing AMP social share buttons, and we knew that they were going to be reliable, they're thoroughly tested, and they worked right out of the box, which was really awesome. And it freed up dev time to just focus on more important things. So that was a good example of just being able to use the existing components. And another cool thing was if we found that something didn't exist within AMP and we really wanted to add it in, that was totally possible as well. So here shows a PR that I had open to add print functionality into AMP. So basically a super simple just AMP action that allows you to print a page. Was able to open the PR, get it reviewed and merged in pretty seamlessly. So the combination of using the GitHub and the AMP Slack both were really critical resources to get the site up and running, and that was really awesome. And it was just awesome to know that no matter what I was trying to build for the site, I knew there was a community that I could reach out to and get help and get guidance for new features I was adding in, which was cool. And lastly, just overall development time and workflow was just way easier having the full AMP site and just the one source of truth for the site. So for example, bringing it back again to my time working on BuzzFeed, the article pages, comparing it to Tasty, the build time, we see 85% faster build time, the Webpack build. And a lot of this is because there's no JavaScript at all for Tasty. So we are able to offload all of that to AMP because we're using the AMP library. So that was a really awesome win for us. And again, along with this win, we just maintaining that one set of templates versus having to maintain both was just really awesome for us time-wise, being able to iterate fast on the site and get it up and running. For example, building out analytics for the site, we just had to build out the AMP analytics, and we didn't have to then also implement it on our main non-AMP site. So things like that just allowed us to ramp up super fast, and it was just like a really great development experience in that way. And overall, I'm just super grateful for being a part of the AMP ecosystem, because starting this project from scratch, it could have ballooned in size and gone kind of out of control. So being within the AMP ecosystem and following these guidelines and these requirements really helped us just keep the site really lean and really fast. And so that was really awesome, and ultimately just led to a way faster user experience. So that was definitely great. And yeah, that's it. So I'm going to pass it back to Abby now.
Thank you, Jess. That was awesome. So now we've talked about the basics of building your website with AMP. I've shown you some examples. You've heard straight from Tasty.co how they built their site. But recently, as we've been investigating this approach for larger production sites, we realized there were some holes in this story. So now I'm going to introduce Andre to tell you more about the nitty-gritty of how we've solved more issues to help you in the future.
Thank you, Abby. So hello, everyone, and a special hello for the folks on the live stream, including my wife and my daughter who wants to be a web developer and YouTuber. So my name is Andre Bandarra, and I'm a developer advocate at Google. So when developers first started asking the team about creating their websites with AMP, they brought up some of the same things that Abby talked about earlier in terms of time it would save. But there were a few feature gaps that they thought were essential before they went all in. The biggest issue across the board was cross-origin tracking and analytics. We heard from developers that they were worried about going all in because doing cross-origin tracking and analytics across AMP cache, AMP pages, and non-AMP pages was hard. To fix that, we launched the Google AMP Client ID API to help developers to uniquely identify and analyze a user's experience across different origins. We also heard that AMP pages didn't provide enough flexibility to create interactive experiences. We've been working in two fronts to address that. Okay, just go back, sorry. So while Mbind provides a lower-level framework to allow powerful interactivity on a page, such as this example from AliExpress, higher-level components, such as the AMP Lightbox Gallery, provide ready-made elements for specific uses. In fact, since announcing our work on this component, several publishers said that this Lightbox Gallery was one of the few remaining features that they needed in order to use AMP for their websites. The AMP Lightbox Gallery is available as an experiment now and set to launch fully by the end of this quarter. Another great example is scroll-bound animations implemented with AMP Position Observer, as Ali just talked about sooner in his talk. And we are not stopping there. Make sure to stay tuned for new components, such as the upcoming AMP Infinite Scroll, which developers at e-commerce merchants told us is essential for them to build their AMP pages with. Now, let's talk about performance we're serving their AMP pages. So an AMP page is only as fast as the infrastructure serving it. The Google AMP cache provides optimal serving conditions, but when serving from your own infrastructure, it's up to you to ensure that those conditions are met. The two big areas to focus are optimizing delivery by using things such as a content distribution network, or ATP2, and also optimizing the content, such as making sure that your images use the best format and resolution. Those practices shouldn't be a surprise to most developers, and they are well documented with plenty of resources online. So service workers can give developers more control over cached content, allowing even further improvements. The AMP install service worker allows service workers to be installed from AMP pages. And the data iframe source attribute loads an iframe from the origin that can be used to install service worker and bootstrap the site, even when the AMP is loaded from an AMP cache. So a good practice is to cache the AMP runtime itself using the service worker. This example uses Workbox.js to do service worker caching. First, it creates a fetch handler that intercepts the request for the AMP runtime and uses a stale while we validate strategy to cache it. Then, it primes the cache with the AMP runtime. This ensures that once the service worker is installed, the cache will contain the runtime, even when loading the page for the first time. So for more information on PWA features with AMP, make sure to watch the Progressive Web AMP talks later today. And a more recent development on AMP performance are server-side rendered AMPs. Those are AMP pages that have been transformed on the server in order to have a better loading performance. The Google AMP cache has been serving server-side rendered page since the end of last year. Let's take a look at how this works. So AMP makes heavy usage of web components, which have to be bootstrapped by the AMP runtime. To prevent the flash of unstyled content when loading those components, the AMP boilerplate CSS initially hides the page. And once the runtime loads, it injects the AMP CSS, and the components are bootstrapped, putting everything in the right place. After this happens, the page is made visible again. The most important bit of work happens in this section while calculating and preparing the layout. So server-side rendering eliminates all but one of those steps, leading to a much faster first render. But let's see how it's done. It injects the AMP CSS in the page and calculates the layout on the server, thus eliminating the flash of unstyled content. With this, there is no need to initially hide the page, and the first render no longer depends on the AMP runtime loading. So the critical path for the first render becomes something like this. And now, it's possible to apply the same improvements when serving AMP from your own infrastructure. AMP2Box provides the AMP2Box optimizer provides the same transformations used by the Google AMP cache. The project is open source, and it's available on GitHub. It's built in Node.js and provided as a canonical implementation for the transformations. And since we know that many developers use a different backend stack, we encourage everyone to check out the code and implement the transformation in their own languages. And please, don't forget to share with us if you do. So let's see how fast it is. We've spent some time comparing the optimized version against the regular counterparts on AMP canonical websites. Those tests were run on a regular 3G network. On AMP start, for instance, the first render with content happens in only 3.3 seconds, as opposed to 5.1 on the non-optimized version. That is at 35% performance improvements. On AMP by example, the page is visually complete within 4.1 seconds instead of 5.4. That's a 24% improvement. And on ampproject.org, the page is completed 2.8 seconds faster. That's a 42% improvement. And on tasty.com, the first render happens in only 1.9 seconds. That's less than half the time it takes to render regular AMPs. So I hope to have everyone excited with this now. So let's see how to get started. AMP2Box Optimizer is currently provided as an NPM package, so developers can integrate this directly into their build process, Goop, Webpack, or even the command line. Implementation is simple. So first, import Optimizer into the project, load your AMP page, and call transform HTML to generate the optimized equivalent. And for websites with a more dynamic nature, we are also providing a Node and Express middleware, also available as an NPM package. Integration is similar to other Node middlewares. First, import the library, apply the optimizer to the middleware stack, and render your pages as usual using Express routes. So for developers who want to test the optimizer, but don't use a Node.js backend, we have provided a proxy server demo. So to test your own website, just clone the emp2box repo, navigate to the Optimizer Express demos folder, install dependencies, and run the proxy sample. So those are only the first steps for the library. We are looking into introducing further optimizations. And if you have feedback on how it works or ideas for optimizations, please reach out to us on GitHub or on the AMP-HTML Slack channel. So I just talked to you about how to make your existing web pages, AMP pages faster. And here is a way that can get you started on building your own website. We just released a bunch of new templates. This year, we've launched even cooler and exciting experiences, including some e-commerce templates with complex interactions like filtering and scroll-bound animations that are optimized for all device sizes. And it's being used on over 3 million URLs, including Fansided, an American company hosting 300+ sites for professional sports, including NFL, NBA, NHL, and others. So stay tuned for more templates. We just launched one today. And if you rely on a CMS like WordPress, we have an exciting talk about our collaboration with CMS, with WordPress, and the potential to build your WordPress site with AMP. You should definitely check it out today at 2:30. And to recap, we're flipping the script. We no longer want to just focus on mobile. We want to focus on building AMP as a library that supports all types of devices and experiences. We don't want you to think as AMP as just another m.web. We want it to be your page. We want you to adopt this approach. Be productive. Thank you.